I'm hopeful, regardless of the outcome. Boost of positive energy without one. Sorry about the jab, I'm on a holy field. I'm bearing fruit, but demons try to eat them like Yoshi meal. I'll piss them off the Batman like Falcone deals. Jungle full of predators, I know how Mowgli feels. So I got the fire, refuse to live in fear. I can spot suppliers, eating fresh drugs. Call me private label.
Oh yeah, welcome to the bonus episode of the Permaculture Pimpcast, where PIMP stands for permaculture is my passion. The only Pimpcast on planet Earth where we discuss permaculture, preparedness, practical living, sometimes the paranormal, and even the parapolitical. As always, this episode brought to you by Hickory Ridge Soap from TwoOldCrowsHomestead.com. Turn that snip into a pimp. Bam! Heaven's Harvest, y'all. 10% off with promo code PERMA. PERMA. Listen, check this out. Get all of my man that I got coming on here in a minute. He's a dude. It's like everything he's doing, it's like we're doing, it seems almost at the same time. He did a video not long ago about how to put back beans and rice for yourself and how you can do it cheaply. So I know this isn't a good advertising thing for somebody like me, but I'm going to tell you straight, like I always do. Get all your beans, your rice, your dry goods, all that stuff. Source it yourself. Only go to a place like Heaven's Harvest if you need seeds that are highly reliable and also freeze-dried goods that you can't produce yourself. All your other dry goods, y'all, we did a video not long ago. You know, I forget, what was it, 72 days on $100. Well, we did it by beans, rice, coconut oil, things like that. All right. If you would like to tip a pimp, you can do it over there on the Fountain app. Fountain app, check it out, y'all. You can listen to all your podcasts over there. You can even triple up the speed, and you can also tip us in a form of, or rather a derivation of Bitcoin called Satoshis, or for short, they call them sats. So if you want to drop some SATs on some PIMPs, do it over there on the Fountain app. You can also leave comments, but I can't respond to any of them, so you're going to have to send an email, Billy@permapasturesfarm.com. And before I forget, remember, Redemption Shield. Michelle just did a 26-mile ruck march with almost 40 pounds on her back yesterday. She is laid up from the feet up, and guess what? She's grounding all day on those. Remember, you can do all this for free, but if inclement weather, anything like that, go check out Redemption Shield, 10% off with promo code PERMA. And then finally, EMP Shield, $50 off with promo code PERMA. Your number one threat ordinarily is not an EMP. It's going to be lightning. Well, they have one of the best transient voltage surge suppressors out there, and they call it an EMP Shield. They got them for your cars. They got them for all kinds of stuff. So go check them out over there. Got all the housekeeping done up front because check it out, y'all. I'm so excited because I got my brother from another mother, and his name is Bear from the internet today.
Yes, sir.
It used to be Bear Independent. So I guess you are the, well, I'll put it this way. You're the man of God formerly known as Bear Independent. So maybe we'll just work with that.
So the first time I met you, brother, was at a Self-Reliance Festival, Camden, Tennessee at SOE with John Willis. And they had the audacity to ask me to speak for like an hour, which was fun. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. We ended up talking about preparedness and community and all that. And I introduced myself as Bear from the internet, and it stuck because all day there were people coming up to me like, "Oh my gosh, Bear." And it's very humbling. "I love you. I love what you're all about. You're incredible. Thank you so much." And I'm like, how do I know these people? They know me from the internet, right? And so it just kind of stuck. And, you know, when we're on platforms like this where it allows you to punch in what your name is, I write in Bear from the internet because it works. So I appreciate you having me on, by the way, brother. You're amazing. And I don't think everybody realizes, even everybody who's listening to the Pimpcast and everybody who's already familiar with who you are and your brand and what you do, I don't think they realize what an awesome guy and brother you are. So, you know, there's a proverb for this: let another man raise your name up. So I'm gonna raise your name up for you because you do awesome work. You have an awesome heart. You're a great brother, and I thank you for having me here today.
No, I thank you for being on, bro, and I thank you for those kind words. But I know the full extent of my ignorance. That much I do know. I'm a work in progress, like so many others out there. Hey, before we get hopping and popping, y'all, I want to tell you. And yes, Mark, Jesus is Lord. So I'll just say that right off the bat. Hey, y'all, I want to tell you right off the bat, as you're coming in, if you would hit the thumbs up, it lets them to know to immediately start suppressing us because they know I got Bear from the internet. So let's just go ahead and let everybody on YouTube go ahead and know, hey, go ahead and start suppressing these guys right off the bat. Bear, for the people that don't know you, I've talked about you extensively. I can't believe it's been this long since I actually had you on the Pimpcast. And excuse me for 1 minute. I got to make sure I got to make this real, bro. Okay.
There you go. The lights on.
It's been so long since I broadcasted live, man. I haven't had the sign on in the back. So, yeah, for anybody watching live, yes, and you're coming in, don't be offended. PIMP stands for permaculture is my passion. All right, brother. As always, every superhero has an origin story. So don't tell me you came from Krypton. You do a lot of superhero kind of stuff, y'all. And folks, he'll never tell you about it, but he's an extraordinary man doing extraordinary stuff. And hopefully we get to cover a lot of that stuff here. So why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background, brother?
Sure. And thank you. I was born and raised on a farm in upstate New York, and I did not realize that the way that we were raised was prepping, but apparently that's prepping. You know, you hunt food and raise animals and grow gardens and cut firewood and make sure that you get your pressure canning and your canning done in the fall so you have stuff to eat for the winter, live out of the pantry, that kind of stuff. And loved it, still love it. And then grew up, I got into power construction, doing wind turbines, high line, some coal plant, remediation, stuff like that. And figured out pretty quickly that the renewable energy industry is an absolute scam. Got tired of doing that stuff. I was on the road about approximately 360 days a year, made a bunch of money, saw a bunch of the country, got to hang out with some really cool people, teach people about how electricity works and all that. And then super fast forward, ended up in North Texas and went on a blind date, essentially. Met my wife, and the father told me the moment I laid eyes on my wife, that is your wife. You can stop looking. And then so I did. 9 days later, I told her I loved her. And then she had a construction company, which was amazing. It was awesome. And I couldn't believe that, like, this awesome, cute little girl had a construction company. So she was like, well, why don't you come to work with me? I'm like, you're so sassy. I love you. It's amazing. And so I did. And at the time I was running my own power construction company, and I very, very quickly quit doing power construction on the road and started like laying tile with my wife. And we were living in North Texas, about an hour north of Dallas. And we're praying over, Father, get us out of this place, because the size of the communities and the towns were growing, and the attitude, the culture was shifting. And I didn't want my kids growing up in that, and the cost of living was going through the roof. And so we did three things at the same time that most people tell you are impossible. We murdered our debt while saving money and praying for and searching for a piece of land to strategically relocate. And we did all three of those things at the same time, making at the time $42,000 a year with a wife and kids, living in a very high cost of living area in North Dallas. And so we actually had, we lived on a third of an acre. And on our third of an acre, we had meat rabbits, meat chickens, laying hens, mature nut trees, berry bushes, row crops, 11 raised beds, compost pile, and rainwater catchment off the backside of the house. And I was producing approximately 40% of the calories that we consumed in my backyard, in a suburban backyard in North Texas. So whenever people tell me, you don't understand, Bear, it's just too hard, I can't do it, I'm like, okay, what's your limiting belief here? You don't have enough land? I did it in my backyard. You don't have enough money? I didn't have any money either. You don't have enough time? I was spending like a half an hour a day. Oh, you have kids? Cool. Me too. Like, your job takes a lot from you? Cool. I was working 70 hours a week. So it can be done. And then, so prayed over land, found land, and we moved from North Texas to Eastern Oklahoma. Came to Eastern Oklahoma, had no idea what I was going to do with my life, and I was praying over that. And I needed a good first aid kit, And so I talked to a buddy of mine that had a sew shop, and I paid him $1,000 to prototype a first aid kit for me. Fast forward, that company's now called Refuge Medical. 119 people have had their lives saved with the Refuge Medical kit in the last 4 years that we're aware of. And we're on 4 continents with all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces electively, and thousands of law enforcement officers and tens of thousands of civilians. And I've got a little YouTube channel, started doing that while I was still in North Texas 7 years ago, I think. I get to Oklahoma, and the father's just pressing on me that there's something I'm supposed to be doing, and I don't know what it is. And so I got into a screaming match with him in the side yard, telling him, hey, I'm stupid, and I need you to tell me what it is that you need me to do, because I'm not going to figure it out on my own, and I don't want to be disobedient to you. To which he replied, read my word. To which I screamed back at the sky, I am. To which he said, on camera, you idiot. And I said, I don't want to do that. And he said, cool, did I stutter? And I said, no, sir, you did not. And so I started in Genesis chapter 1. And I've been reading the Old Testament and the New Testament every week on camera for 5 years now. Have done every word of the New Testament and most of the Old Testament. Just finished the book of Daniel. And so, October last year, got ordained as a pastor. So that was interesting. So I'm an ordained pastor. I own a company that makes first aid kits. And then I've got internet presence with Bear Independent on YouTube and on Patreon. And then we've got 2 ministries, Grindstone Ministries and Caleb House. And Grindstone does what FEMA should do. We are not-for-profit, 501c3, nationally registered. We have the same clout as the American Red Cross. We can do everything the Red Cross can do. And we're privately funded by the Bear Nation. You know, people donate money to us. We're good stewards of that. And then when somebody gets their hometown schwacked by a tornado or a hurricane, we deploy, and we typically go and look for the people who last week didn't know how they were going to buy groceries and this week don't have a house. So we go find those people and do debris removal for them, pray with them, give them hot meals, relocate them, find food for them, shelter, clothing. We do all that with Grindstone Ministries. And then out of Grindstone Ministries, we got bored. It was in between tornado seasons because it's typically spring and fall. And so we found a place that needed some help, or rather the father found them for us. And they were a restoration facility for juvenile human trafficking survivors. And so Grindstone went there to help them work on their facility so they would be ready to receive kids. And while we were there, second to last day there, I was walking outside and the father punched me in the forehead. I was thanking him for this opportunity. It was a beautiful day, and I was surrounded by dozens of good people who were volunteering their time, and everything we needed to get this job done was getting done. And I said, we need more of these. And the father said, yeah, we do. You're going to build them. And I said, hold on a minute. I don't know how to do that. And he said, I do. I said, okay. I guess we're in the juvenile restoration space now. And so we started Caleb House, Caleb with the K, because Caleb is an Old Testament biblical badass. And we began with the concept that we were going to build restoration facilities, which is a fancy way of saying a place, a home where we can put these kiddos back together again after these sick pieces of trash abused them. And very quickly realized we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. So very steep learning curve. And luckily the father likes us enough to teach us a bunch of lessons that didn't cost anybody their life. But in the meantime, we got a phone call that somebody needed an extraction. And we didn't know anything about extractions, but they needed help. And I know a bunch of cool people. So I texted some cool people and I said, my truck is pointed in a certain direction to go do a certain thing. Do you want to come? And in like 15 minutes, my truck was loaded with awesome human beings. And we went and we did our first extraction. We've since done dozens of extractions and have gotten dozens of convictions on these pedophilic a-holes who are abusing these kids. And so we do rescue and restoration of juvenile human trafficking survivors. And none of this stuff is really anything that, especially 7 years ago, if you were to ask me what I'd be doing in 7 years, would any of this have been even been in my mind? But I think there's a lesson in that if you're maintaining a relationship with the Father and you're trying to be obedient to your Creator, if He asks you to do something, dare I say, tells you to do something, and you don't do it, you're being disobedient. And disobedience will bring curses upon you, Deuteronomy 28, versus obedience, which brings blessings. And so I have a very interesting, unique existence, but I'm also incredibly blessed to the point that I can't even explain to you the myriad blessings that I get to experience every day. And there's this phrase at the beginning of Deuteronomy 28 that says, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim, the Lord your God, then you will be blessed, comma, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. And I never understood that until about 2 years ago, because I'm 100% overtaken by blessings. We were talking about this off camera before the show started. You asked me, hey man, how's everything going? What do you got going on? And you and I listed 10 different things that we're both dealing with right now. They're all blessings, but I am 100% overtaken by blessings. So that's me in a nutshell. It's a long nutshell, but that's me.
I love the nutshell, bro. But you want to talk about how well you're blessed? You're one of the only few guys I know to come out good on a blind date. I know a dude named Dave. Hey, for all of you people out there, let me just give you this one real quick. A guy used to work for me. His name was Dave. And he met this girl, and it was a blind date over the internet. Swore up and down that she had the body of Shakira, that Latin singer. And so he's got this little romance, and every single day, this guy's driving me nuts. And I'm like, Dave, I will pay you. I will pay you this next weekend I will pay you weekend's wages to go out there and meet this chick to find out she ain't what she says she was. Anyway, he gets off the plane. She said she had a body like Shakira. Got off that plane. She looked like Shaka Khan, bro. So I know the Lord was blessing you, bro, when you ended up good on a blind date. So, and your wife seems like your wife and kids. I met them briefly the first time I met you, and it was at a Mexican joint where the guy there, it looked like Johnny Bravo, and it was near John's place at SOE in Camden, Tennessee. And yeah, man, you got a beautiful family. So do I, and the Lord is blessing us. Man, I really need to get a t-shirt instead of the one I got, man. I need to put that quote from Deuteronomy, because the blessings with, one of the things we've been, as far as blessings, man, really praying that the Lord leads us in the right directions, that He gives me, the wisdom and the discernment and all those things that I need right now. And it's a tough road, but it's a worthwhile road. And speaking of those things, I want to kick you back a little bit. With all my kidding aside, I want to talk about free speech ultimately, but I want to go back to what you're doing at Caleb House. You told me a statistic that blew my mind back when I saw you a little while ago at Mountain Readiness. And by the way, folks, that's coming up May 3rd through the 5th. Mountain Readiness. And you gave a statistic there, man, that blew my mind, as far as I had no idea. And I dare say a number of the people listening right now don't know the number of people that when they get caught up in this pedophilia sort of thing when they're little, how many of them go on to be repeat offenders, and what you've done to intervene and break that cycle. Why don't you tell everybody about that?
Sure. So, yeah, I didn't know this either until we got involved in this. And I'm a data-driven person. I have feelings. I possess them. I try not to use them. I like facts and data, especially for decision making. And so I started doing research on this, and there's a disgusting statistic. Each victimizer is statistically responsible for 82 victims, not 82 offenses, 82 individual victims statistically. Now, that's the mean average. And so some people only offend one time. Some people offend hundreds of times, but on average, the number is 82. And it is very much so a learned behavior. This targeting of children, sexual assault of children is a learned behavior. And that means that the victimizer, the person who's doing this thing at some point in their life, had this thing done to them. And it became normalized behavior for them. And they now act on what they consider to be normalized behavior now. It's a weird line for us to walk, because we target the victimizers. One of the things we say is we make sure that bad shit happens to bad people. I want those people to get the highest number of, I want as many convictions as I can get on those people, as many consecutive life sentences as possible, because they knew what they were doing, versus the victim, the child that didn't consent to this, didn't want this to happen, was not okay with this. Children cannot consent to sex, regardless of what the far left may say. They were taken advantage of. And that, by the way, is the definition of trafficking. Human smuggling is putting people in cages and moving them across borders, and that does happen. Human trafficking is the exploitation of one human by another. And there's labor trafficking, sex trafficking, there's many different buckets. But the victimizer took advantage of the victim. And so now that the victim has learned this pattern of behavior, either we break this pattern of behavior, this generational curse, through restoration, or they statistically at some point are going to become a victimizer themselves, along with all the guilt and all the shame and all the hurt that comes with that. And as a follower of Christ, it's a very challenging line to walk. And I've had a lot of people ask me, well, if you believe in Messiah, where's the mercy in this? Well, the mercy is that the Old Testament, the Torah says that I get to hit you in the rock with a rock in the head and kill you if you do this. I can also go to Matthew 18, where Messiah says it would be better that I tie a millstone around your neck and push you into the ocean than you harm one of these children. The mercy is you're still alive. You still have an opportunity to repent of your sins and meet Messiah. That's the mercy. But you will reap what you sow, right? And so if you're sowing a bunch of BS, you're hurting a bunch of people. It's just a matter of time before that comes back around. Call it karma, the universe, biblical principles, whatever you want. It's just a matter of time before that comes back around and somebody hurts you. And the way that I prefer for that to happen is we get you in handcuffs and you go inside of a box for the rest of your life. If we lived in a different day and age, I'd be all for the rock pile, but we don't live in that day and age right now. But it's statistically 82 victims per victimizer. And the goal of Caleb House and our restoration facilities is to break that cycle of behavior, break that generational curse, so that these children, this abhorrent behavior that's been normalized is no longer normalized. They learn the error of their ways. They understand what has happened to them, but they're not defined by it. A lot of these kids have trauma, dude. And we have trauma, praise Yah. We have trauma therapists. We have medical doctors. We have martial artists who train with these kids so that they can get some semblance of normalcy back, so that this is a thing that happened to them. It's not the defining characteristic of their life. And you can take trauma with any human being who's been through a traumatic situation. You're really only given two options there. I can overcome this thing, or I can let it define who I am. And so our goal with Caleb House is to take this terrible thing that has happened to you once, a dozen times, hundreds of times, and make it as small of a factor in your existence from this point going forward as we can, so that A, you don't continue in this pattern of behavior, and B, you're now coming out into society as a productive member of society. And if I get to introduce you to Messiah along the way, that'd be amazing as well. And one of the coolest things, heartbreaking but coolest things, I've told you this, but we've got another audience here today. We did an extraction, and it was nuts. It was a little rough. And we finally get to a safe place, and I had these three teenagers sitting on a stone wall just looking at me, all three of them with their arms crossed. sideways head, just looking at me. I said, "What's up? What do you guys got on your mind?" And the one of them, which was the mouthpiece that had been elected to speak on behalf of all three of them, says to me, "What do we have to do what you do?" I said, "What do you mean?" They were like, "Are you like a cop? Are you in the army? Like, what is this? What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm none of those things. I've never been any of those things. Um, I'm just a guy that the father tapped on the shoulder and told me, you got to do this. Why are you asking?" And they said, "Well, we need to learn how to do what you do." Why? Why do you need to know how to do what I do? And the one kid sitting furthest away from me, he says, we gotta get through this and learn how to do what you do, because I've still got friends back there that we need to go back and get." And it still hits me like a ton of bricks today, but it also illustrates that there is nobody better to minister to these kids than these kids. What a testimony if you're able to overcome this and it's not the defining thing that happened in your life. And we have the opportunity to make a small army of these people who have been restored, who have the ability to speak on this situation with authority because it happened to them too. And so now we can shift the tide from a wave of victims to a wave of overcomers, a wave of people who've been restored. And my whole focus with Caleb House is to do this until I don't have to do it anymore, to work ourselves out of a job. And it is, the threat is exponential, not linear. If one bad person can break 82 people, I have to both deal with the bad people so that they don't continue to break statistically 82 people each. But and that, because that creates 82 people I got to put back together again. But if I can take one person that's been put back together again and use them to minister to 82 people, if I can swing the pendulum in the other direction, to me, it's a win. So that's what we're trying to do with Caleb House. That's what we are doing with Caleb House. We've had graduates from our program already, and even that's humbling and amazing. So,
Bear, your vision for Caleb House is astonishing, and honestly, it's the reason why we are shifting all of our efforts. We've been working with another group, and no longer we're going to work with them. We've already, as a family and as Perma Pastures Farm, and we've done some work with Bear. I don't know if he wants to get into that or not, but it would be helpful for those out there that want to get on board to see what your vision is, because that is honestly what got me on board. The people we were working with before, and I'm not saying anything against them, folks. The difference is, as you heard Bear describe, he doesn't just extract them. There is a rehabilitation end of it. They don't just take these kids, put them in a foster home, and then they go away. This is like a lifelong commitment. You're essentially adopting these kids. And that's why from now on, bro, you're who we're working with. And yeah, so why don't you give them a vision for what it is you have going on there? I mean, to whatever extent you want to talk about it. I know some of this has got to be a little bit, there might be a little bit of permaculture involved, but I don't know what I'm at liberty to say and not to say, because I know there's got to be a certain degree of OPSEC here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So first, to your point about this is a lifelong endeavor, it is. Some of the children that we have in our care are little, down to a year old. And there is an alarming increase in the abuse of nonverbal children by the people who are doing this because they can't testify in court. And so you're talking infants and toddlers. And for the people who are out there psychologically who would say that these people, it's a sexual orientation to be attracted to a child, there's nothing sexual about it. It's not about sex. It's about cruelty. It's about harming people because somebody harmed you. And every single person who has done this, who has been interviewed after the fact as to their why, it's never been about sex. It's about harming the innocence, as much innocence as they possibly can, in retribution for the fact that somebody harmed their innocence. And so we have children who can't speak yet in our care. And when you have a 1-year-old, You can't have a 1-year program. You can't take a year to put them back together again because they're 1 year old. And so there's no finish line for what we do. We have a lifelong program using house parents. And so if the father puts a child into my hand, it's 6 years old. That child will be with us probably for 12 years until they're legally an adult. And during that time, they live in a house that's their house with house parents that are their parents, where they're homeschooled, where they live in a homestead setting with permaculture applications, with their own chickens and their own sheep and their own fruit trees and their own berry bushes and their own woods to walk in and their own bike to ride on a street where nobody's going to hit them with a car. And we raise them. We're commanded to raise them up in the way that they should go so they do not depart from it when they are older. And there's a passage in Deuteronomy 4, I believe it is, that says, if you forsake the widow and the orphan, your wife will be a widow. Your children will be orphans. And we take that super seriously because it's not an accident that the father brought this problem set to us and dropped it in our lap. And so even if we don't think enough of ourselves some days to be able to do this, he does. He thinks enough of us in union with him to be able to solve this problem, at least the part of the problem he's allowed us to see and he's put in front of us, because there's 17,000 kids a month that go missing. I can't rescue all of those kids, but I absolutely can rescue the ones that I know about. I absolutely can restore the ones that I've got. And so we use a house parents model that the house parents have a house, and in that house, there are children. And those children are, for all intents and purposes, their children. Now, I mentioned we had some people who have graduated from our program. Your son, William, is your son, even if he's not in your house, right?
Right.
And if he needs something and he picks up the phone and says, hey, Dad, I'm struggling, I need help, you're going to be there for him that fast because that's your son and you love him and you're a good father. Same thing with us. These graduates from our program, just because they're not currently under our roof doesn't mean they're not our family. And so whatever they need when they get out there into the world, however we can assist them, whether it's with jobs or with just wise counsel or Bible study, whatever it might be, they're still part of the family. And there's a program in Eastern Oklahoma called Cookson Hills. And Cookson Hills is kind of your last stop before your children become property of the state. If you as the parent or you have extenuating circumstances and you just can't keep your kids, you could give them to the state of Oklahoma or they can go to Cookson Hills. Cookson Hills is a very large facility with hundreds of houses and hundreds, maybe 1,000 kids. And I can't give you all of their details either, but they use the house parents model. And they have been coaching us on this stuff for a couple of years now about best practices because they have some people there. Like there's one woman there who was a house parent for 54 years.
Wow.
And now is grandma. She is grandma to every kid there. And she bakes dozens of cookies every day and makes grilled cheese sandwiches and saltine crackers. And there's just hundreds of kids that run back and forth to grandma's house every day. And it's the same concept as what we're doing with Caleb House. We learned it from them that it works, that if you give this child stability, normalcy, peace, protection, a covering, a biblical covering, that there are people here who love you and will not allow anything bad to happen to you. And so you create that environment first, and then that creates the permission on their behalf for them to let you in so that hopefully you can help heal those wounds that others have perpetrated on them, so that this thing that happened to them again is not the defining thing in their life. It's just some terrible shit that happened to me one time, and now I'm over it. And then the ultimate expression of that is now it's a testimony. Now I exist in spite of the fact that this happened to me, and nobody's ever going to hurt me again, and I won't let anybody else hurt anybody else either. And so that's what we're doing with Caleb House. And your son, William, has been a blessing to us. You've been a blessing to us coming alongside us because we've had permaculture aspirations, but I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not that good at it. And so having access to people who can come and spend time with us and dig swales with us and say, run the sheep over there, put the chickens here, plant your trees here, put a pond in there. It's been an absolute blessing.
Yeah, he's fired up about it too, and just thankful so much for the opportunity. I mean, we do a lot of this work, and we've been doing it for a long time. And just by, I guess it would be the way the Lord would have it. He moves back there with his family, so he can be near other family, and just happens to be much closer to you. So,
well,
yeah.
What's crazy with that, I won't OPSEC him, but he was telling me where he was at, and I was like, really? He goes, yeah, why? I was like, dude, we've been there. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, Grindstone was right there. He's like, no way. I was like, yeah. So we were almost running in the same circles without even knowing it. And it's cool how the Father puts these little signposts along the way, So yeah, he's a great young man. I keep calling him a kid because he's young, but he's not a kid. He's a young man. And I appreciate that about him.
No, and he's he could submit somebody if he had to. I mean, he knows his jujitsu, man. And tell you what, he also knows his permaculture. Instead of sending him off to college, we sent him off to Australia, and he learned from the best. And he's one of the best at it. So, yeah, man, it's just a real joy that he's so close to where you are and able to help out. Yeah. Bear, let me hit you up on another thing. There's a couple of things, and there's a couple of esoteric questions in here because, like I said, we cover it all on the Pimpcast, and I would, even if you don't have a response, I'd like to at least ask you. We'll get to that in a minute, but as far as getting your message out, there's a whole lot of breaks being put down in platforms like the one we're on. It seems like the podcasting realm, which is why I'm there now, is the only real bastion of what's left of free speech in the United States of amnesia. And seems to have a population that couldn't care less about it. Well, all of that is, by the way, fixed with the crucible of hard times, but I digress. I want to ask you, how are you faring with trying to get the word out and the things that you talk about? How are you able to do that when it seems like the suppression in so many different ways? I could get on here right now and I could probably do the most awful thing concerning, I could say, look, I'm a trans-testicle polar bear, and I think people ought to donate money to me. And they wouldn't have a problem with that. But on here talking about some of the things that you're doing, they could, and they almost certainly will, demonetize this video, which I couldn't care anything less. They're not paying me anyway, and they ain't paying you. So, yeah, so it doesn't really matter anyway. How are you getting around
that? The Father likes us, and that's cool. So because I'd be totally screwed if he didn't. I mean, both personally and professionally. To your point about the monetization, one of the things that I think the vast majority of people don't understand, because they're blessed that they don't have a YouTube channel, is that monetization on YouTube, for context, YouTube is not a content platform. YouTube is an advertising platform that masquerades as a content platform. And monetization is a factor for the content creator, but what a content creator gets paid is peanuts. It's not enough to, I have almost 200,000 subscribers and millions, and I think the overall channel has over 100 million views on it. And what YouTube pays me per month is not enough to make a mortgage payment. And that's a fact. Mm-hmm. And so it's less about, for me, YouTube is not about the revenue that comes from the content being monetized. What people don't understand is that the YouTube algorithm doesn't touch demonetized content. And the algorithm runs in a 7-day cycle, and it takes a minimum of 10 days to appeal if your content's been demonetized. And so when YouTube demonetizes any content on its platform, it is in effect a shadow ban, because the algorithm will not touch it. And it takes 10 days to get an appeal, and the algorithm works in 7-day cycles. So by the time, even if you win the appeal, the algorithm has moved on, and your content has not been recommended to other people on the platform, and in many cases hasn't been shown to the people who subscribe to your content in the first place because they want to watch it. And so that happens to us all the time. I just had my alternate channel, I think 10 days ago, was deleted out of nowhere. Like no warning, no nothing. Blue Collar President is the alternate channel, and it was there one day, gone the next. And so we appealed that, and thankfully we got it back. But for a channel that's got 200,000 subscribers on it, we do Intel Brief Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every week on YouTube. And I'd get on my Monday morning brief, and I'd have 2,000 to 3,000 people live. And within 48 hours, that brief would have about 50,000 views. And the channel was smaller. Now, and I think in large part because we were very vocal during COVID-19, and we're still very vocal now, and I have the audacity to read the Father's word on camera.
How about that?
Word for word. Now, with 200,000 subscribers, many of the people who are subscribed to our channel have been unsubscribed multiple times, do not get alerts when we go live, can't find the most recent live stream that we've done. And I might get, maybe, it's weird, it caps at 19,000 views. Doesn't matter what I do. It always caps at 19,000 views in 48 hours. And so, and I had YouTube tell me that my channel is not eligible to get a silver play button because of the content that I create.
Wow.
Thanks, YouTube. Yeah. And so we have a Patreon, and I know Patreon has not been great to other content creators in the past. We have not had any problems with Patreon. We're also on Rumble. There's also the Bear Independent podcast, which, without trying, we're in the top 1.4% of podcasts in the world, which I find comical. And then we've got our website as well, bearindependent.com. And if you have a hard time spelling, all the links are in the description of my live stream because I'm simulcasting, so you can just click on it instead. But then the other way that we get the word out is by talking with folks like y'all who are gracious enough to have us on your platform. And then we do live events as well. And, it feels like, because I'm a classically diagnosed workaholic, by the way, I don't know if you ever noticed that.
Yeah.
It feels like,
brother.
Yeah. It feels like I'm doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I sit here and list all those things out, and I'm like, oh, no wonder I'm tired. That makes sense. But it's absolutely a challenge. And, you see right now, like the federal government, Congress is literally debating whether or not there should be a ban on TikTok. And I'm no fan of TikTok. I'm not on that platform. I think by and large it's drivel. But the reason that Congress is stating that TikTok should be divested into the hands of American ownership is because the Chinese Communist Party could be taking that digital exhaust and using it against Americans, as well as propagandizing Americans. It's like, well, what do you think's happening on YouTube and on Facebook and on Instagram? The exact same thing, except that digital exhaust is going into the hands of Americans and American alphabet soup agencies, not the Chinese Communist Party. And then because if we're going to make the argument that it's bad for Americans that China owns TikTok, don't they also own a whole bunch of American farmland and water rights and American companies and American senators and congressmen and probably the president, and have defense contracts, and also have, warehouses and manufacturing facilities in Mexico and in Canada, and on and on and on and on and on. And so if it's really about China bad, why aren't we doing all these other things? We should be banning all of these other things, Smithfield Foods, rather than just TikTok, right? And so it makes me think that there's more afoot here than China bad, ban TikTok. Because notice, TikTok's not a problem if it's owned by Americans, which means what? It just gets that digital exhaust out of the Chinese pipeline, ByteDance, and over here into the American pipeline. So, and then even like Refuge Medical, our medical company, has a TikTok channel because it's all the rage and the kids are on there. I walked by the camera. I concealed carry a weapon 24/7, 365. I walked by the camera and my gun was on my hip, and I think it was a month. Was it a week or a month, Kale, they shut us down for?
It was like 10 days.
10 days. We got our channel revoked for 10 days because I walked by the camera with a holstered Glock on camera. So what ends up happening on all of these platforms, whether it's YouTube, Patreon, TikTok, Instagram, Meta, Rumble, even, is it's an affront to the First Amendment on all of these platforms, because whether you're trying to or not, you end up conditioning your speech. You can't actually say exactly what you think. And there's something even a little bit more insidious there as well. As your audience grows, and I've watched this with a lot of channels, and I've had to fight against it myself. As your audience grows, like, think about the preaching in a mega church versus the preaching in a little tiny corner, little white building corner church in a small town. Which pastor is going to be more filled with the Spirit? Which pastor is going to be more hellfire and brimstone? Probably the dude that has like 9 people there, not the guy that has 9,000. Because as the audience grows, you try and say things that are more applicable to more people so you can maintain that rapport with that many people. I think that's something that everybody should be careful about, curtailing your speech because you want the largest number of people in this room as possible to like what I have to say. That is in of itself a lie by omission, if you ask me. You should say all of the unpopular things, and if half of your audience leaves, okay, who cares?
Exactly.
So,
bro, I'm right there with you. As far as that whole TikTok thing, I do find it curious. Well, now this will get us immediately banned if I say exactly what I think, but concerning matters in the Middle East, TikTok apparently is allowing folks to be a little more loose with their opinions regarding that matter. Now, I'm no fan of 60 Minutes or 2020 or whichever one did it, but they just did an expose on TikTok. They showed the kids what they see in America, like you said, this drivel, this nonsense, just idiotic Kim Kardashian's butt kind of stuff. But over in China, their TikTok is showing them how to build things, how to think, how to use the who, what, where, when, why, and how before you come to a conclusion on a matter, how to do this mental antivirus, how to do math, how to do real science, how to do all these other things. So yeah, but that same poison, you don't have a problem because Google owns the platform Bear and I are talking on right now. And if I were to say exactly what I think about everything in its full detail without cloaking it, whether it was a sweet and sour sniffles or whether the issue that's going on in Ukraine or whether it's over there in the Middle East, whatever the case may be, I got to sit here and I got to couch this language, or I'm going to wind up like the Texas boys where they cut the feed, turn off your computer right in the middle of it. Bear, hey, bro, I know we're approaching. I want to be very respectful of your time because I know you get a lot going on, but got to hit you up with some of these esoteric things, man. You okay with some of this?
Send it. I got a little more time. Yeah.
Okay. Let me go ahead and kick out. Now, y'all got any crazy? It doesn't have to be crazy, but it's going to be something off the beaten. We got kind of deep here, and I want to hit Bear up on some of these other things that he may or may not have an opinion about. So this one here, for those that aren't watching, it says, the Bible tells us there will be signs in heaven. What are your thoughts on the total star eclipse? I'm not sure about the date he's got here, but it is, in fact, 2024. They wrote 2017.
He says he was at the one in 2017 and he loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there too. I happened to be where there was a total. I was working out of town, happened to be in Kentucky at the time, and it was a total eclipse. Literally, house lights came on, crickets started chirping, whole 9 yards, and I had this crackhead standing next to me. Yeah, that's a whole nother story on itself. But Bear, go ahead. What do you got on this?
All right. So I've spoken on the eclipse of my channel many times. In fact, the alternate channel, Blue Collar President, if you're on YouTube, you can go to the Blue Collar President. I have a standalone video on the eclipse in 2024. All right. First of all, the eclipse is happening on the day that would be the new moon from which we count the Passover, the Pesach, per Leviticus 23. And so we know from Genesis chapter 1 that the moon, the sun, and the stars are for signs and appointed times. Signs, right? There will be signs in the heavens. And so a solar eclipse is absolutely a sign. And appointed times. Appointed times are the Moedim, or the high holy days that you find in Leviticus 23. So literally from the new moon, which would be on April the 8th, which is when the eclipse is, that is that is a new moon observance. It's a festival given in the Torah of the Old Testament. We're supposed to be observing anyway. And so we have signs in the sky in conjunction with appointed times. That means it's important. It's doubly important. So there's something more to this eclipse than, oh no, the sky went dark for a few hours. That being said, I've addressed this so many times, I default to, hey, the sky's going to get dark for a few hours, comma. I think that eclipse that began in 2017 began the 7 years of fat per the parable of Joseph in the Old Testament in Genesis 40-ish, around there. So Pharaoh has this vision, and there's these 7 fat cows and these 7 lean cows. They're all down by the Wadi, by the Nile, and the 7 lean cows devour the 7 fat cows, right? And he's like, I have no idea what this means. They bring in Joseph, and who, by the way, there is massive archaeological evidence of the fact that Joseph existed in Egypt. And so I love it when history and the Bible smash together. But anyway, Joseph comes in, he says, listen to here, Pharaoh, here's what's up. We're going to have 7 fat years. We're going to have 7 lean years. And so they doubled the governmental take from 10% to 20% during the fat years. They put back twice as much so that when the lean years came, they didn't all starve to death. And so one interpretation and the conviction that many of my brethren have had is that 2017 marked the beginning of the 7 years of fat, and that this eclipse in 2024 will mark the 7 years of lean. And I think societally, geopolitically, there's a lot of congruence with that understanding. As to whether or not it ushers in end times, because I've gotten that question from a lot of people, is that, and I've seen so many people going, it's going over 9 different cities named Nineveh. Nineveh is going to get the destruction it deserves. Dude, read about the prophet Jonah. If you're going to make the Nineveh argument, what should you do? You should be a man of Elohim, and you should go to the heathen when everybody's attention has been interrupted by the fact that the sky went dark. Maybe you could go preach the word of God to them, and 110,000 men would be saved. So that's when everybody makes the Nineveh argument. I'm like, cool. What does the Bible tell us about Nineveh? Find a reluctant man of God to go preach the word. Cool. So you should do that. There should be people in each one of those Ninevehs as the sky goes dark, preaching the word to the heathen, in my opinion.
Well, let's not also get the Nineveh got a stay of execution too. So yeah, maybe that would apply. So it's not like Sodom and Gomorrah overnight. They did get a little bit of a, they got a break for a while.
100%. And so, and then as far as, is this end times? No. First of all, if we are in end times right now, John owes me an explanation, because I've read all of Revelation and we're not in the book of Revelation. Next, there's a lot of precursors to get to the book of Revelation based upon the teachings in Matthew 24 from Messiah. The primary one being the abomination of desolation, which is found in Daniel 11:31, which is patterned on Antiochus IV Epiphanes in 176 BC, which was at the temple, which we don't currently have. Antiochus, the Roman, stood up a graven image of Zeus and then slaughtered a pig to Zeus at the Temple Mount, and that made the temple unclean. And there's, for those of y'all who are maybe on the fence about biblical commands, go read Leviticus 11 and understand why that's an abomination. And so precursors have to have a temple in order for it to be desecrated, for it to be abominated. And then Messiah says, when you see that sign, then let those who are in Jerusalem flee to the mountains. So right now there's an argument amongst the Yehudim, amongst the Jews, who have already selected potential red heifers to make the waters of purification to cleanse the Temple Mount. There's an argument as to whether or not you need an actual temple, or if the Temple Mount itself will serve to begin the daily morning and evening sacrifices. That's important because the mark of the Antichrist, and who's patterned on Antiochus IV Epiphanes, is the interruption of what is continual that Daniel refers to in Daniel chapter 11. What is continual is the daily offerings that aren't currently happening because there is no temple and the Jews don't control the Temple Mount. Comma, what about Ezekiel? Ezekiel chapter 40 forward are all dimensions and descriptions. It's an architectural instruction for a physical temple that does not yet exist. And so in my mind, if we're going to get into end times and we're trying to reconcile Daniel with Matthew 24, with Ezekiel, with the book of Revelation, with all of the minor prophets, Ezekiel's temple needs to be built. And it's not the temple that you see in the book of Revelation 21 and 22, because that temple descends from the heavens. So there's a physical temple that is prophesied to Ezekiel that has to be built first. And then what is continual, the morning and evening sacrifices, has to be taken away. And then the abomination of desolation is set up, an image of a false god, the engraving of Zeus is set up, and then a pig is slaughtered. And then per Messiah, Matthew 24, then you flee to the wilderness, because that's the beginning of the birth pangs, which ushers in the tribulation that John talks about in Revelation. So this eclipse is not us knocking on the door of all of those things, because there's a lot of other things that have to happen in order for this to be end times in my biblical understanding.
Man, well, if we're in the 7 fat years right now, boy, 7 lean years for a society as decadent as ours. Mm-hmm. Good night, man. This is exactly why we talk about permaculture, preparedness, and practical living here, y'all. Bear, it's man, you had another man. This is why, I mean, there's conversations I've had with this man that have floored me in person. And one of the ones, it was an epiphany you came to about the Order of Melchizedek. Mm-hmm. Do you have time to share that here, or?
There's so much backstory on that.
Yeah, we probably can't get into that, but
I'd probably make a bunch of people mad too. I could sum it up saying this: the Yehudim, the Jews, who are one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and I would submit to you biblically, if you are a believer in Messiah and your Romans 11 grafted into the tree of life, you must understand that the tree of life is an Old Testament idiom for Israel, and your Messiah is a Jewish man per Matthew chapter 1. You are in ketubah covenant. You are in covenant with a Jewish guy who is prophesied to be both Mashiach ben Joseph, the suffering servant from the book of Genesis, and Mashiach ben David, the righteous king in the line of King David. And so the Jews have understood wrongly for millennia that there are 2 messiahs, each coming once. Messiah ben Joseph to suffer and atone for the sins of his people, and then Mashiach ben David, the righteous king in the line of King David, who will restore the Father's people to the Father and slaughter all the enemies of Israel. And so what they failed to realize is it's one Messiah coming twice. First as the suffering servant, Mashiach ben Joseph, and then second as Mashiach ben David, the righteous king in the line of King David. And that's where you get that Revelation 19 imagery coming from, which is incredible. Just the description of Messiah in Revelation 19 in no way tracks with what is taught of Messiah in the Gospels, because the Messiah of the Gospels is Mashiach ben Joseph, the suffering servant, and which, praise Yah, he came to atone for our sins. The world needed that. I needed that. But when he returns again, at that point, the Great Commission, the gospel has gone out to all nations, and everybody has had an opportunity to repent. And the Father has sealed his people in the forehead, Revelation 7, and the enemy has sealed his people in the forehead, Revelation 9. And so the whole world has chosen sides at this point. Everybody knows what side they're on, which a lot of people are like, is crypto the mark of the beast? You're not going to get tricked into it. You can't get tricked into the mark of the beast, because the Father seals his people in the forehead first. The only people who are going to get the mark of the beast are going to be those who weren't sealed in the forehead by the Father first. But I digress. And so when Messiah returns in Revelation 19, there's 2 teams. There's Team Messiah and Team everybody else. And Team everybody else gets absolutely slaughtered. And that's when that happens, the Jews, the Yehudim, are going to, I believe, recognize him first, because he's coming in the line of King David. And then a remnant, if you will, a few of those who, Revelation 14, verse 12, have a testimony of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, and keep the commands. They're doing both, are going to go, That's him. That's him. That's Messiah. And the Jews are going to be over here going, look, he finally showed up. We're going to say he came again. And the Christians are going to be over here going, we don't see him. We don't recognize him. That's not the Jesus I was taught about. And we're like, that's because you guys didn't study Revelation. And so blessed are the peacemakers. There's this group of people in between these two global factions representing billions of believers who are under the covenant of the Father, and some of whom are under the covenant of the blood of the Son, saying, this is the one, this is him, the anointed Messiah. And so the Jews will recognize him and then learn of his first coming, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, as foretold in Matthew 24, versus the Christians. Unfortunately, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, there'll be many people who are under a strong delusion because they did not receive the love of the truth by which they should be saved. And so one of the things that I think a lot of us, when it comes to end times eschatology, there's such a richness there in the prophecies that you don't even know what to think, what to believe. It's almost impossible to put it all together into one timeline that makes sense. It's very basic in my mind. Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Love God, keep his commands, right?
This is the whole duty of man.
Exactly. And then you look at Revelation 22, verses 12 through 14. I'm the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those doing his commands so they can enter through the gates into the city. And people will argue those commands. I do the commands that Jesus told me to do. Cool. Matthew 22, 36. Love the Lord your God with everything you got and love your neighbor as yourself. 100%. The next question is, how do I do that? Because if my definition of love is different than your definition of love, how are we as neighbors supposed to love each other, right? If I'm punching you in the face but telling you I love you, if we have different definitions of what love looks like, how are we supposed to dwell together in unity? Psalm 133. And so it turns out the Father gave us a book on what it means to love him and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's called the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And there's a lot of people who say, well, that was done to the cross, or done away with, nailed to the cross. We don't have to do that stuff anymore. And that's actually not true. If you actually read Colossians chapter 2, typically it's brought up at verse 14. It's not the case. It says, because of Messiah, let no man judge you in eating or drinking or new moons or Sabbaths or high holy days. For this is Messiah and a shadow of what is to come. It says, because Messiah suffered and died for you, you shouldn't let any man judge you when you do these things. If you look at Matthew 5:17, I come not to destroy the Torah or the prophets, but to complete it. And that's what jams people up, is that word complete. It's the Greek word plerao, which means to embody. I come to embody it. Now, the cool thing is, none of us is going to do it perfectly. None of us, even if you boil it down to the most basic commands of love God with everything that you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. We're humans and we all have good days and bad days. And some days I suck. And even on those days, his grace is still sufficient for me. We need a Messiah because we're never going to do it perfectly. But when you're not doing these things, it will be very difficult to ascertain who Messiah is when he returns, because he's no longer going to be cloaked in pagan garb, going back to the concept of Joseph. When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, there's a parable in that, then they recognized that he was who he said he was. So we've had Messiah clothed in pagan garb for 2 millennia. When he returns as the righteous king in the line of King David, Revelation 19, he's not going to look like he did in the Gospels, literally and figuratively. And I fear that there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to get it wrong, who are going to think the bad guy is actually the guy, and the guy who's actually the guy is the bad guy. They're going to have the teams mixed up. And so all that to say, Pastor Bear hat off, read your Bible. Please read your Bible, pray over it, do what it says. Don't take any man's word for it, mine included. Like, put your nose in the book, read it, even if you have to read it at a snail's pace to begin to have a grasp of what it says, but diligently study the word, and the Father will speak to you through it. And so all that, going back to the eclipse, there's nothing that we should be afraid of. And I guess we'll end with this. We literally should fear only one thing, and it's the Creator. And Messiah backs that up. Do not fear he who can destroy the body, fear he who can destroy the soul. That's the creator. Messiah is the creator in flesh. Serve God, keep his commands, right? That's it. And everything else, whatever it might be, if it's fear, if it's anxiety, if it's fear of failure, inability to perform, the scope of work that he's put in front of you is too much, it's too great, you don't have enough resources, like, so he's God. Like, your God either is God or he's not. He either can do what he said he was going to do or he can't. You know, Messiah fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, right? Like, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could tell that mountain to move. And we're over here like, man, I hope I make it to my next paycheck. And it's like, your God is God. Have you tried talking to him? Like, he's not, like, the birds of the field have food and shelter, bro. Are you not more than the birds of the field? Are you not more than a sheep? He loves you intimately. If you knew how much he loves you, you wouldn't be afraid. Like, he killed himself for you so you could come home again. And we're over here like, I hope I can get my oil changed in time so I don't void my service warranty. It's like, dude, really? Come on, bro. The creator of the universe went out of his way to make a way for you to come home again. And all this other worldly shit is robbing us of our joy. So
That's what I'm talking. Hey, bro, it's always a joy, man. We got to do this more often. Bear, once again, for the people that came in late, brother, how can people get a hold of you, and what is the best way to donate to these incredible causes that you champion?
Bless you, brother. You can find me at bearindependent.com, BEAR independent. There's 0 A's in the word independent, by the way. Bearindependent.com. There's links to everything we do there. And then on our anti-human trafficking ministry, that's Caleb with a K, calebhouse.org, KALEB house.org. And the reason for that is Caleb is one of 2 that gave a good report in the land. And when he was 85 years old, he looked at this mountain and he said to his bro Joshua, he said, yo, dude, I want that mountain. New Living Bear translation. And Joshua said, there's giants up there, the sons of the Rephaim. And Caleb, at 85 years old, said, I'm as good today as I was the day Moses tapped us on the shoulder and said, go spy out the land. That was 45 years ago. And then Caleb looks at his homies. They pick up their axes. They go up the mountain and they kill. Caleb, at 85 years old, kills 3 giants in the promised land, Hebron. And that mountain becomes the mountain where Othniel puts the threshing floor that David buys to build the temple. It's the same mountain where the temple was built, Solomon's temple, and then Nehemiah's temple. It's the same mountain that Messiah looked upon when he was crucified. That mountain. If Caleb hadn't slaughtered giants in the promised land, dude, none of us would have been here. And so if you feel like old and beat up and there's giants in your way in the promised land, who cares? Your God is God. Go up the mountain, slaughter the giants, build a legacy. So
mic drop right there, y'all. Want to thank you so much for being on, Bear. And I want to thank everybody that was in the live chat today. Hey, remember, check him out. And that's where we're going to be throwing a whole lot of our resources, the incredible work that they're doing over there with Bear and his crew. And every time I'm around him, it's a joy, man. It was a joy to have you on, brother.
Bless you, brother. Thank you.
All righty, y'all. Until next time, stay alert, stay alive.
You spitting that manicotti, yeah, I'm talking saucy. All they wanna build is a prison world full of pet Tamagotchis. Living kamikaze, got me out of body like I'm Goku SS3. They wanna push me to the center like a cell, they wanna spin up at the center of the nexus, me. They want me to bow down, but I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior. I will never bow down, 'cause I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior. They want me to bow down, but I'm a warrior.